Well, hello everyone. Welcome from near and far for the Contraceptive Implants Learning Resource Package webinar. I see we have about 18 participants at the moment, and you've been very active in the chat screen, which indicates you understand some of how this works. So thank you everyone for joining. My name is Megan Peterson, and I will be moderating the webinar, and I work for JPIGO on the Accelerating Scale-Up of Implants program. I wanted to start briefly by just giving you some basic understanding of how this technology works so that you are enabled to ask questions or communicate any challenges as they arise throughout this 1 hour. On your screen, you should see the first slide of our PowerPoint presentation, which has the JPIGO logo, some names, the title. If you're not seeing that, please chat within the chat window. Hopefully also you can hear us. At the moment, we cannot hear you. We have not enabled your microphones. On the bottom of the screen on the right, you should see a window that says chat. And you may also see the conversation that has taken place thus far. If you have any questions or are having difficulty throughout the webinar, please feel free to chat in that window. For example, I see one of the participants, Mita, has commented that she cannot hear. So that I think would be a speaker problem on her side. So hopefully she can sort that out. We may also direct you to our colleague Shantae, who will be joining momentarily, who you can privately chat with, and she can help determine what issue you might be having and fix for you. In the chat screen is also where you can ask questions about the content as we go along. However, we will be saving about 15 minutes at the end for all of the questions. So please, if you can hold most of the questions until the end, that would be helpful. And I'm getting a lot of feedback from those in the chat that most people can hear very well, so that's a great sign. We're looking forward to engaging with you on this then. So as you've seen, you can chat through the screen also. You can raise your hand. You can put a smiling face or laughter if you like how things are going. There are many ways you can indicate how your participation in the webinar is coming. Okay, so with that, I wanted to just kick off this webinar today about the Contraceptive Implants Learning Resource Package. So of course we have to start with a picture that really shows what this is all about. And for this, it's someone being trained on a anatomical model on how to insert an implant. And of course, this will come up again later as we talk about the learning approach used in developing the package and how that might be of value to your programs. The webinar agenda is that we will first give you some background information or context. First, related to the Implants Access Program, which is the Gates Initiative, and Mary Jane Lacoste from the Gates Foundation will be speaking about this. Then we will talk about the Accelerating Scale of Implants project, which is JPIGO's project under that initiative. We will then speak about the competency-based training approach and the learning resource package. Then we will hear from our colleague in Kenya about some program learnings of using the package. And finally, we will have time to discuss some Q&A. I should also note that because of the webinar technology, there can sometimes be a delay in speech. So if you have a question, please wait a few seconds before hearing back from us so that we don't muddle the line with multiple things at the same time. The webinar objectives are 4. You should see them on the screen now. Number 1 is to articulate what the Implants Access Program is. Number 2, to explain New Implants LRP and its focus, or the Learning Resource Package and its focus. To describe how country programs like Kenya are using the Learning Resource Package products for training. And finally, 4, to list how you could use this LRP in your own setting. And with that, I would like to introduce our first speaker. Our first speaker is Mary Jane Lacoste, the Senior Program Officer for Family Planning, Service Delivery, and Quality at Bill & Melinda Gates Foundation. Mary Jane joined the Bill & Melinda Gates Foundation in May of 2014, working with the Family Planning team as the Senior Program Officer for Family Planning, Service Delivery, and Quality. As such, she leads and manages implementation of the Implants Access Program, ensuring that the strategy focuses on expanding access to method choice and strengthens quality of care, including counseling, interpersonal communications, clinical training, service delivery, and performance monitoring. Prior to joining the foundation, Mary Jane worked with JPIGO for over 20 years, spending the last 15 years in the field as country and regional director in Tanzania, Indonesia, and Malawi. She has worked with ministries of health, donors, and other stakeholders to develop and manage implementation of large reproductive health, maternal, newborn, and child health and HIV projects in many countries in sub-Saharan Africa as well as Indonesia. Mary Jane holds a Master of Arts degree from the University of Maryland and a Bachelor of Arts degree from Loyola University. And with that, Mary Jane, I hand over to you.
Great, thank you, Megan, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. I'm really pleased to be able to join you today and speak to you a bit on behalf of the foundation. As you know, or I'm sure as many of you are aware, that family planning is really a very personal priority for Melinda Gates, in particular at the foundation, and will continue to be a priority for us moving forward, particularly as we now sort of center ourselves around women and girls' development more specifically. Obviously, family planning is a huge component of that. I wanted to spend just a little bit of time with you to tell you a bit about the family planning strategy that was recently refreshed here at the foundation, and where, so you'll have some context for where the Implant Access Program fits within the overall family planning team's efforts. The goals for the family planning team at the foundation going forward, the more immediate goal right now is really working with organizations, with stakeholders, with all partners to achieve the goal that was set at the London Summit, to bring access to family planning to an additional 120 million women not currently using by 2020, but that's sort of our medium-term goal on the way to what I think what we all agree is the overall long-term goal globally on achieving universal access to family planning for all who want it. I'm not going to spend a lot of time going over this slide. I know it's a little busy. Apologies for that. But basically, this is sort of the framework, the model that the family planning team has used in order to develop the strategy that we have in place right now, and really looking at, what drives the wheel around family planning. What are the various components that need to be considered as we look at investments that we want to be making as a foundation going forward to support global efforts in family planning. So basically, realizing that the critical pieces of the overall family planning strategy need to address national plan and policy, funding, local adaptation, local solutions for local problems, looking at what the platforms are for scale and how those can be leveraged, performance monitoring and accountability. Obviously, data is a huge issue for us and really helps to justify investments that we make going forward. And all of this centered around there being political will at the highest levels within a country, and stakeholders being aligned to that political will and being aligned to sort of the global goals around family planning. So with that said, we right now within the strategy have 7 initiatives, actually 5 initiatives, going forward, and looking at what the tools are that are needed in order to make change, to enable change in this global field. So performance monitoring and accountability, where we're looking at data, transparency of data, data for decision making, evidence for optimizing service delivery. You know, what are some areas that can be catalyzed for addressing greater change within the family planning field. Contraceptive technology, this is still a strong area for the foundation, and looking at what are the needs that are out there that are not being addressed by current methods that could potentially be addressed by newer, improved methods. So once we have those tools, then looking at working with countries, with other platforms, regional platforms, with global partners, and global platforms on issues around policy and advocacy. And then really, I think what is probably the biggest area right now for us is accelerating country action. And we do have 9 priority countries for us right now for the family planning team as a whole. Those are listed in the bullet down below at the bottom of that slide, which I believe is slide 8. India, Nigeria, Indonesia, Pakistan, DRC, Ethiopia, Kenya, and then Senegal and Niger, which are sort of our target countries within the Ouagadougou Partnership, but again, using the Ouagadougou Partnership as a platform, as referenced earlier when we look at policy and advocacy. The Implant Access Program itself does not fit neatly, I would say, into any particular one of these family planning strategy initiatives, but rather we are looking at all of these, apart from contraceptive technology. I would say we're not specifically looking at that, but we are looking a bit at the market around implants. But for the other ones, we have some investments, or our investments target at least one, if not more, of these initiatives going forward. The other thing that I wanted to say was that the countries, and we'll see this a bit later in the subsequent slide, although we have 9 priority countries for the family planning team under the strategy, the Implant Access Program also goes beyond those 9 countries, and looking at those countries that have higher volumes of implants being procured over time, and looking at what efforts are needed there to help ensure that the large volume of implants that are coming into those countries are eventually getting out to women in a safe and quality and voluntary way. So just to give a bit of background now on the Implant Access Program, as I said, it is an initiative within the family planning team. It falls under the family planning strategy, but doesn't fall neatly into any single one of the initiatives, and really spreads across those initiatives. So where this came from was following the London Summit, there was much discussion around implants in particular within the foundation, and what could be done to make implants more available to women. Price was seen as one of the biggest barriers that was restricting women from accessing that method, or making that method a more available part of the method mix in any given country. So there was a movement and discussion and finally negotiation with Bayer and with Merck MSD to establish a volume guarantee, which basically means that guaranteeing that a certain amount of implants would be procured every year between 2013 and 2018. And if that volume was not achieved through the procurements that were already taking place through other partners, that the foundation would then cover the additional costs for the volumes that were not achieved. The good news is, for the last 2 years, those volumes, well, good news for the foundation, I think good news for the world, because implants are getting out there more broadly, is for the past 2 years, 2013, 2014, and looking very good for 2015, that those volume guarantees are going to be met. So the purpose, again, of the Implant Access Program then is not only to increase the access to implants, as I said, and make sure that those volume guarantees are in place and are being met, but really looking at the Implant Access Program as a mechanism for making sure that changes that occur within the market and within the family planning field really improve the overall quality of family planning, and improving the overall quality of the method mix in countries, more attention to counseling, more attention to voluntary acceptance of methods, and really seeing this not as a single method program, but as a program that really catalyzes change within the family planning service delivery setting. So, as I said, in the past 2 years, we've seen good success with the volume guarantees, and that implants are being ordered in large volumes and are getting out to the field. The attention in the last year has really changed or shifted, I would say, much more towards now ensuring that the implants that are being made more available are getting out to women and are being provided in a quality manner. So that's really the focus that we have right now as we're moving forward, really looking at execution and making sure those systems are in place around coordination of supply chain at the global level, and that's been working really, really well. Looking at what we can do to support capacity building of providers, and again, this is not just from the foundation's perspective or from the foundation's investment, but obviously USAID and UNFPA are very big partners in this space, huge partners in this space, with support available both for procurement and for capacity building. So really working with them on how we can coordinate and have much more visibility into what's going on with training at local level, also with other partners like DFID and SIF, who are supporting some efforts at the country level. So going forward, where we see ourselves going is making sure that we're continuing the good work that's been done around the coordinated supply planning and the monitoring of the supply issues, and starting to build on these successes that we're seeing in countries in terms of the capacity building, and really moving forward to make sure that their service delivery setting has that much broader method mix, and that women are accessing family planning in a voluntary way with informed choice. This last or second to last slide that I have on the governance structure, goal, and objectives of the program. I'm not going to go into great detail, but this just lays out for you that within the program we have 4 specific objectives where we are looking at the service delivery side, which is expanding the access and use of implants. We are also looking at, I mentioned a bit when I referenced the Family Planning Strategies Initiative on contraceptive technology, we are also looking at market dynamics within the implant space. And then finally, or rather, looking at supply chain and what can be done to improve that, and then finally creating this enabling environment. So really linking the implant access program back to more global initiatives around family planning, like FP 2020, like the Reproductive Health Supplies Coalition, and just, again, sort of raising the profile of implants globally within the family planning space. The last slide that I have for you is reflecting the countries that we originally had set as priorities for us for the program. This is shifting a bit over time, but not too terribly. And basically what this reflects is when the program was developed, or as the program was being developed, looking at those countries that had a history of very large volumes or higher volumes of implant procurements. And going forward, I think, as we're currently in the process of looking again at those countries and looking at where the foundation can support some catalytic investments around improving access to implants, we're still seeing these countries coming up as well, and a few others sort of moving into the space, but really paying attention to that and making these countries priorities for any interventions that we might want to look at for, again, improving the access to implants. So with that said, I'm now going to turn the session over to really greater experts in this area than I am, and we're first going to have Ricky Liu, talk to us. Ricky is the Family Planning and Reproductive Health Director at Chapago. He has over 20 years of experience providing technical and medical expertise for family planning and reproductive health programming. I think I've worked with Ricky for many of his 20 years. He's been instrumental in the development of national reproductive health training systems in more than a dozen countries across the globe. His expertise includes areas such as long-acting and permanent methods of contraception, post-abortion care, sexually transmitted infections, infection prevention in healthcare settings, maternal and newborn care, infection prevention practices, and cervical cancer screening and treatment. Ricky leads efforts to advocate and implement evidence-based approaches to family planning and reproductive health interventions and cervical cancer prevention in low-resource settings. So we'll first hear from Ricky, and then following Ricky, we will hear some Kenya-specific program experience from Emma Kariuki, who is a program officer working on the Accelerating Scale-Up of Implants project for Chapago's team in Kenya. She worked with the Kenya Ministry of Health for 18 years before coming to Chapago, and in that capacity, her last assignment was the District Reproductive Health Coordinator with the responsibility for ensuring provision of quality reproductive health services and nursing administration specifically for family planning. Emma's been a provider, a trainer, and a mentor for about 15 years. She participated in the initiation of FP-HIV integration and cervical cancer in Kenya, and was previously a service delivery officer under the Gates-funded Chupange project led by Chapago in Kenya, responsible for technical support to county teams and implementation of the program activities. So Ricky, over to you.
Well, thank you very much, Mary Jane, and I know that was a long introduction, but again, thank you very much for this support from Gates, and as well as having had the experience as well as the pleasure of working with you in a number of situations. Let me also greet our participants. I see their names. Most of them, I think, I've worked one way or another, more current as well as in the past. So welcome, good morning, good evening. I know our colleague from the Philippines, it's a little bit late in the day, but just the same. Welcome and thank you for your participation. So it was great to learn about the fact that implants are now available in selected countries, and they're available at a much reduced price. And we also are aware of the fact that of the rule of thumb, no commodity, no service. But the other side to that one is that if you have a commodity, but if you don't have the environment, the system to deliver those services, we also do want to make those implants move and reach their end user, which is the women who would like to use this long-acting reversible contraception. So as we look at the introduction and expansion of the availability of implants, there are several considerations that we have to account for. One is about providers. Now, while Norplant was available in the past, it has been a long period of time when providers as well as trainers have not been trained on a regular basis on the use of implants, particularly with the newer implants like Jadel as well as with Implanon. In some countries, you have Sinoplant 2. In Indonesia, you have Indoplant 2. Now, there are some countries who have been doing that, but it's not as widespread as we would like it to be. Now, in terms of the provider dependency, we use this term in the sense that at the end of the day, it's the providers who are at the front line who needs to be able to deliver the services under updated policies and guidelines. They would need the equipment and the setup in order to provide implants within the context of the family planning services. We need to have providers who could not only do the insertion but also be able to provide removal services. And one of the critical part to delivering services is, of course, the ability to provide counseling that allows clients to make a decision in terms of what they want to use for contraception. And then at the end of the day, it's also that once we've set up the environment is to make sure that there is a regular and continuous supply of implants system so that there's no stockouts. Then, because of the introduction of implants, we also need to be looking at how are we progressing. This means improving, strengthening the health information system for monitoring and evaluation. And then the other critical part is, of course, making sure that women and their families, as well as the community, are aware that there are choices available when it comes to long-acting reversible contraception. Now, having said this, Jipaigo has been a recipient of the Gates Foundation-led Implant Access Program, which Mary Jane just mentioned a while ago, which is to create an enabling environment to expand access to contraceptive implants. While we are focused only in a couple of countries, Nigeria, Kenya, Zambia, and also South Africa, the intent is that in these countries, is that we could fast-track national efforts to strengthen and improve family planning services through advocacy, quality service provision, scale-up, and evidence-based programming. When I said that it's only a few countries, these are also countries where the need is great, the population and potential impact of introduction scale-up of implant is also great. But we could also learn from these countries in terms of how other countries would be able to take the lessons learned and improve their services. And so at the country level, we, within the accelerating scale-up of implants, one of the key areas that we are working on, or we have worked on, is really on advocacy and strategy development in collaboration with the Clinton Health Access Initiative in partnership with a key stakeholder, the Ministry of Health. Because at the end of the day, this is a short term initiative where we want to be able to leave a legacy that the Ministry of Health and the country themselves can take on to continue the expansion of access to implants. Now, at the country level as well, we focus on capacity building of trainers as well as providers. And within this context, also supervisors who can provide supportive supervision. And then ensuring that the context of providing the services is within, how we would say, high quality family planning services. Now, we also have a global level kind of mission when it comes to the accelerating scale-up of implants, which is coordination of global efforts within the volume guarantee partners. One of the opportunities that came about from this funding is the standardization of implants, training materials, and approaches. In the past, we have had materials coming from Bayer, from Merck, as well as other sources, including Jipaigo's implant materials, that were sort of like available in different forms as well as different media. And so we are looking at this opportunity. We use this opportunity to actually bring together all of these different resources and put them into a standardized training package, which we will be discussing in the next couple of slides. Then the other global level initiative that is a result of the accelerating scale-up of implant is the dissemination of evidence-based experience and lessons learned, which you'll probably get some insight or a peek into what's happening through Emma's presentation towards the end of this webinar. And so what you're seeing in this picture is my colleague, Dr. Willie Shasha, who is facilitating a clinical training. You're going to see a lady who's practicing on an arm model, doing an insertion of implants. What you're also going to see towards the left part of the picture is a model, both the handheld as well as the gynecologic pelvic model for IUD insertion. What is happening here is that in most of the countries where we're working, countries are adapting using the standardized material, but also incorporating other aspects of long-acting reversible contraception, including IUD and implants. So when you talk about high-quality clinical training for providers, it's essential that we ensure safe and effective access to implants as the core principle of our clinical training. So in the clinical training principles that we at Chipaigo actually follows is that the goal of clinical training is to help health professionals gain the knowledge, the skills, and attitudes or behavior to provide high quality clinical services. In order to do this, I think most of you have been working with us, familiar with the competency-based training, which focuses on the ability of the service provider to perform the skill and not simply know about the skill or about the product. Now, the key element to this one is that we have trainers. In order to be effective, they must also be clinically proficient. That means that they have the skills that they want to, that can be transferred, in this case, implant insertion and removal, and the capacity as a trainer to effectively transfer the skill to new providers. So with competency-based approach, we focus on competencies which are broken down into knowledge, skills, practices, as well as behavior. With behavior, we look at making sure that the trainer models expected behavior, what we would call talk the talk and walk the walk. When we say wash your hands before and after procedure, we want the trainers to actually be doing that. Washing their hands before and after, whether it's in the classroom or in the clinical training activity. So we want our providers to actually be seeing themselves, be seeing in the trainer as these are the behavior that needs to be transferred to you as well. It's not only about what's in the book. The other part that we put into our practice is what we call humanistic approach, which uses model for simulation of clinical practice. And before we would like the new provider to work with clients, we want to be sure that they know the steps, they become competent on the steps using the model before proceeding on to the next stage, which is working with clients. This would ensure and safeguard client and patients' well-being. And then lastly, we use largely the adult learning principle, some of which are like we need to prepare the learning environment so that it will be supportive to trainers. We need to be looking at providers who are actually going to be using the skills, that the skills are relevant. We build on what they know. So if they're already doing counseling, we take a look at how can we improve your counseling skills in order to be able to provide long-acting reversible contraception as well as implants. So this is just a snapshot of some of the materials that Chipaigo has developed in the past. The learning resource package would consist of a series of materials from reference manual that's keyed to trainers and participants material. So with the new implants training materials, what we did was take the existing materials, which I've already mentioned a while ago from Bayer, from Merck, from Chipaigo's Norplant implant guidelines. The FP training resource package is available in K4 Health, as well as various materials that we have found in the field, reviewed them and modified them to fit into what we would call a standardized learning resource package. So the standardized learning resource package reflects the latest of WHO's medical eligibility criteria. Right now, it only applies to the two WHO pre-qualified contraceptive implants, Jadel and Implanon, both the traditional as well the Nexplanon or NXT. We consider a wider audience, not only OBGYNs or specialists, but also taking a look at mid-level providers who are going to be at the front line doing this service. We are also looking at adapting it for low resource setting because that's where most of the services are happening, at least in the countries where we are working. And one of the things that we always do is we look at the information that's available and drill down to only the essential need-to-know information in order to be able to deliver high-quality services. The other component that we really made sure that it's there is we need to be able to put in a stronger counseling process in order to ensure that clients actually make the right decision, a voluntary decision to use the method. And then, of course, infection prevention practices is a critical element as a cross-cutting issue in what we're doing. So the process also included not only our reviewing, but also included a review by other experts and getting their feedback. And the result is what you are seeing right now, which is a new standardized training package. I realize that some of you may have already seen the new standardized training package. Some of you have yet to see it, and it's actually available. If you're interested, we could link you up to a electronic web page where you can get materials. So right now, the components of the implant learning resource package includes a reference manual, a learner's handbook, and a trainer's notebook. We also have digital materials like video clips, PowerPoint presentations that's ready to go, job aids that are both developed here as well as coming from the field, and you're going to see one that was developed by our Kenya team, and also linking with the Balance Counseling Strategy Plus materials, which is available from Top Council. The training kit includes a training arm. What you're seeing here is the RITA arm, or the reproductive implant training arm, which we use which we are recommending to be used for training. But we also realize that there are other training arms from Bayer as well as Mark. And again, from country to country, we work and see how we could effectively use what's available on the ground. There's also an instrument kit. Right now, because we don't really need an insertion kit, the kit right now includes instruments that would allow providers to remove implants when it's time to remove them. So with the reference manual, it's organized in terms of need to know information. So we have chapter 1 providing a wide overview of information about what's out there in terms of implants. And then chapter 2, we have counseling, and then the eligibility and client assessment for chapter 3, infection prevention for chapter 4, and then insertion, post-insertion, and follow-up care for chapters 5 and 6. We also have management of side effects and then implant removal. We've also included instructions for what happens when they want to have another implants inserted. And then we have a short section on organization and management of high-quality services to ensure that the critical components of providing services is not left out, that there's a reminder that these are the other things that the provider as well as their managers needs to be considering when starting up services. Now, the learner and trainer notebooks, the critical component would include a course description, the curriculum and schedule, which we're going to see later on. We have knowledge and performance assessment tools. The assessment tools, these are really about, when you look at it, the key information that the provider needs to understand and be able to remember when providing services, as well as a checklist for the 1 and 2 run. Plans become available, we can always add it later on. Then we have also course evaluation tools, just to make sure that these courses are meeting the needs of providers. And then, of course, for the trainer notebooks, we have tips for trainers on how to make sure that their training and the training approaches matches competency-based training principles. So this is just a snapshot of the model course. When we say the model, this is how we would like trainers to organize their training, that the critical element of what's in the learning resource package is reflected in this course. So generally what you're going to see is that day 1 introduces the concept, introduces the classroom practices, as well as provides an opportunity to for providers to practice on models towards the end of the day. From day 2 to day 4, it's essentially in the morning is that they work at the clinic to do counseling, to do insertion and remote insertion when there are cases that are clearly for implants. One note to consider here is that while this is an implant training course, is that we still operate within the concept of when you're doing counseling, you offer what is available in the facility, and if the client chooses implants, that's when you do the procedure. Now, all of these are under the supervision of a clinical trainer when they're doing counseling as well as insertion. when there are opportunities for removal, that's also a time for providers to practice on removal. The afternoon are usually relegated to didactics as well as continuing practice from what was learned in the morning. Towards the end of day 4 is a day largely focused on what do we do next. Planning for transfer of learning, planning for startup services. Now in some countries, they've fitted in IUD, interval IUD into this 4 or 5 day course. Some other countries, they squeeze down this to 3 days. I think at the end of the day, the design or the adaptation of the schedule will depend on who are the providers that are being brought in, what are their skill level, so that we could meet their skill level with what is needed in the training. So the model schedule only provides a guidance to the trainers in terms of what you need to cover and on which days that you need to be focusing on practice. And so with that one, what's going to happen is to give you a snapshot of how some of this is being reflected in our work in the field. For this webinar, we're fortunate to have Emma, who's based in Nairobi, with us, and will be calling in, and is actually in, and who'll be sharing her experience with implants in Kenya.
Great. So Emma, if you can unmute your microphone.
Hello. Thank you, Megan. Thank you, Nikki. Good morning, everyone. Good evening. I'm Emma from Kenya, presenting on the Learning Resource Package. Go to the next slide. Yes, in Kenya, we have had a training package, and the country has a training package on the learning, on the long-acting and permanent methods, a scale-up strategy which is already in place, and this helped us even when we were starting the ASI project. The Ministry of Health had already recognized the gap in skills from the provision of long-acting reversible contraceptives among service providers, and there was already a training package even as we were starting the training. The results of this were seen from the Kenya Demographic Health Survey that was done in 2008 that showed that there was need to improve on method mix, given that the implants and intrauterine contraceptive devices had a low uptake. Next slide. So the guidelines allow implants to be provided by nurses and clinical officers who are usually the majority of health workers working at the primary healthcare setting, where majority of population seek these services from. So for making these services available, we needed the training for the health workers in those settings, and like I had alluded earlier, the Kenya Demographic Health Survey showed the need to promote method mix. So in the aspect of promoting method mix and promoting clients' rights and their choice of a method, then this called on for empowering health workers to be able to provide the method of choice for the client, and with that, enhancement of skills. Next slide. So the Learning Resource Package, I had alluded earlier that in Kenya we have a training package, but the Learning Resource Package developed by Japaigo, which we disseminated to the Ministry of Health and other partners in working in family planning and stakeholders, and our national training package does not include some of the information in the learning package, and the Learning Resource Package has helped us update on implants, Implanon NXT, and we've also benefited from the video clips that are added into the package on insertion and removal of Jadel, Implanon, and Implanon NXT, classic Implanon and Implanon NXT. The Learning Resource Package also has checklists which are summarized. Every time we're doing our training, we do a pre-training skills assessment, for service providers, and then after training, after they attain competency, we do an assessment. The checklist in the learning resource package are detailed, and they have a summary at the end of it, which helps trainers summarize the scores for participants, and it is friendly and easy to use. So anybody training on service providers, when you want to take a pre-skill assessment, it is easy to use the checklist and to get the scores for the participants. The other thing that is in the resource package, which makes it friendly, is the balanced counseling strategy in the counseling content, and this helps service providers to be as comprehensive during the counseling session, and also integrating family planning with other services, because they are able to address that client holistically, being in the window of reproductive health. In the photo on our right, you can see a client a couple being counseled by a service provider. The green part is the counseling bag, which has methods in. It's a job aid that helps in counseling. And then we have the checklist, the job aids on the wall, checklist on methods, and this is to enhance the counseling session. We realized for the continuation and retention of long-acting reversible contraceptions, clients need to get clear information. They need to get to know about the methods, how they work. So counseling is important, and this is an aspect that we strengthen during training, and it has come out very well in the learning resource package. For the Kenyan team, I think there was already a training package. There was already a training material which was developed under the strategy for promoting long-acting and the permanent methods. And after dissemination, we shared in the technical working group of the learning resource package, and in that meeting there was the concept that the training module in Kenya will be revised next year. But before then, we need to continue using the method. So what do we do for the current training package before it is revised? And that's how we were asked to do an addendum to the existing MOH package. And the addendum that we did included introduction to Implanon MXT, the content which is not within the current training package, instructions for Implanon MXT insertion, checklist for Implanon MXT insertion, and then checklist for implants removal. That caters for both the 1 and the 2 rods. In our Kenyan guideline, we also have the other method, long-acting reversible contraception, that is the intrauterine contraceptive device. The checklist, we did revise as the Kenyan team, we did revise this, and so when we shared with the MOH, we added it in the addendum, and then the video clips, which are not in our current, the Kenyan guidelines. So this has actually helped so that anybody using the material is able to do that. The Kenyan team also put together a job aid on MXT Implanon insertion and implant removal. For the removal, it caters for both the 1 and the 2 rods, which is in draft form for now, and we are looking forward to it being finalized after review of all the stakeholders. So also give us your comments as we look at it. Next slide. So in summary, the learning resource package is a resource for trainers and providers because it gives comprehensive information about implants, all the information, the technical information about implants, how to go about the provision of implants, in the administration of implants, counseling, employing the balanced counseling strategy, which helps not to overburden the client with information, but you give targeted information, you give comprehensive information of the methods chosen, strengthening the component of counseling, which if not employed will make clients not have retained the methods that they are taking. That also helps to improve the way they done it, the checklist. There's also a checklist for counseling. So when we are training, We also use this checklist to check when some of the simulated sessions are also through counseling. So we use the checklist to also guide on that. So if you are training service provider, I would also recommend that you use the counseling checklist. It helps to strengthen service delivery, and even in the provision at the clinics, we encourage the service providers to use the checklist among their peers in peer-to-peer support. The other thing is that the checklists are easy. The checklists are easy to use in pre-training assessment and the post-training and the post-training.
Okay, yeah, we may have lost the last bullet from you, but I think your last point was just that the video clips are also additional resource materials that you've been able to utilize in the Kenya program. Great. Thank you for that. So I'm just going to do a quick wrap up, and then I'll have, we have Ricky, Mary Jane, and Emma all here for question and answer. So just quickly, I wanted to summarize by saying, I think that we've hopefully achieved the objectives today of describing what the Implants Access Program is. That was with Mary Jane, explaining what the new Contraceptive Implants Learning Resource Package is and what it's focused upon. You've heard from Emma about how programs are using the Learning Resource Package and how they've actually been able to work with the Ministry of Health in adding an addendum to the national package based on what was in the LRP itself. And then I think starting probably to get some ideas on how you could use this LRP in your setting or how you might be able to utilize pieces of it for that. I also wanted to take a moment just to thank, I know we have some participants here, and whether they're here or not actually, to thank groups like Bark MSD and Bayer for the product materials that they've developed, which have allowed us to create this package. Also, of course, to the Gates Foundation and to USAID, who are also, of course, large donors on this front, and are enabling groups like Jamigo to continue training health workers, delivering this very important. So with that, what I'm going to do is open it up to questions. And what I'd like to do, just to reduce sort of the audio feedback and the problems that could happen about asking questions via your microphones, is that if you have questions, please chat them into the chat window. Just type them there. And I'll be moderating and sort of pitching questions to the appropriate persons. And I'm actually going to start with a question that Tembe Magore from MSH, from the E2A project, proposed a couple minutes ago, and this one's going to be to Ricky. And she was asking, does the LRP include adaptation instructions for lower level health workers, such as health extension workers or nurse aides, for countries that want to implement task sharing? So Ricky, maybe you could tell us a little bit about your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so right now, thank you, Tembe, for asking that question. And in addition to me, I'll also be calling on Emma to share some of her experience working in Kenya when it comes to other lower level providers. I think the material right now is actually geared for mid-level providers such as nurses and midwives in terms of their being the primary provider for most of the frontline facilities. We also understand that there are countries where the frontline workers would be clinical officers or extension workers, etc. And I guess it's going to be on a case-to-case basis to take a look at what are the prior eligibility requirements for health extension workers to be able to do this, and then match this with what is already in the materials. Now, one of the beauty of the learning resource package is that the material, while it's global, it would include all of what is need to know information. It also includes the current updated medical eligibility criteria as well as practices. The beauty of this one is that countries, when they take a look at what is needed by the country, could wrap around the delivery of this information and this skill set based on who needs to be trained. I think at the end of the day, it is actually adapting the knowledge, the skills, as well as the behavior towards who is going to be providing services. Towards that end, we could work with you, or we could provide some information in terms of how this would be adapted. But the information in there is already, would you say, what a provider be trained to do the services needs to know in order to be able to perform the skills. Emma, have we done training beyond nurses and midwives when it comes to in Kenya?
Yes, we have used the learning resource package using the training, the training package, and like I had said earlier, that the learning resource package, and as we look at the schedule, we are able to do trainings. We are able to factor in with the resource package the comprehensive information on the implant.
Great, thank you.
I don't know what exactly you wanted to
Yeah, I
say.
think that was helpful, Emma. Thank you. It's good to have the Kenya context on the cadres of health worker that you're training. So thanks. I think actually I'm gonna take. It looks like we have questions from John Towson, from Julie, who's from Japaigo. We have a few others. I'm going to quickly answer Julie's question first, just because this one I can answer. So Julie's asking, how do I access the memory stick containing the training resource materials? So right now what we're advising is that you can download the materials on ReproLine Plus. The link to the materials was shared in the invitation to this webinar, but we'll also publicize that again afterwards. It's actually reproline+.org/resources/implants-LRP. And I can actually I'll put it in the chat window after we're done with speaking. So then there's a question from John Townsend, who's from the POP Council. And he asked, what estimates do you have for shipments of implants in the first half of 2014? For that, I'm going to pitch this one to Mary Jane. And I'm not sure if we have that information readily available, but we do, that is something that the program is
we
looking
do
at.
have our partners from JSI, as well as Chai. And that is an information that we follow up with John and the rest of the participants in this workshop. One of the things that I think we need to emphasize that work that we're doing with the accelerating scale of through the market access program includes Chai as well as JSI, and these two institutions have been tremendously helpful in terms of helping us in country, in terms of the relationship with government, in terms of the strategic planning, as well as the logistics and supply, and with JSI also providing some back in terms of the information as well as data that they're getting from countries as well as from agencies in terms of what is going on in terms of supply of the commodity basis.
Sure. And Mary Jane, do you have any comments you want to add about the shipments?
No, just to say that we certainly do have that data available. I'd be happy to follow up with John after the phone call if there's any particular countries where he'd like some additional information. But yeah, we can. And I don't know if anyone from JSI is on the call right now. If Layla or Sarah is on, if they're not, we'll certainly get the information to John. No problem.
Sure. Great. So I do see that it's almost, we're almost out of time. If there's people who are willing to stay on a few more minutes, we can answer some of the questions that have come up since. So I know Erin Portillo is asking about a little bit more information about the counseling modules and what they include. She asked, for example, are they mainly method mixed counseling or method myths and misconceptions? And maybe Ricky, you could comment on the content of the counseling section and what that's based upon.
Yeah, so thank you, Emma, Erin, for bringing up the question. And to us, the counseling piece here is important and a critical part of training as well as for follow-up. Because at the end of the day, it's making sure that these clients, when they accept it, knows fully well what they're going to expect in terms of the advantages, as well as the limitation and effectiveness, and at the end of the day, some of the side effects that they're going to be looking at, because we're always conscious of the fact that most of the removals, the premature removal, are actually result of misunderstanding of miscommunication in terms of the changes in the bleeding pattern. So when it comes to the counseling piece in this material, it includes some basic elements of in terms of clients' rights, in terms of the approach to counseling, the interpersonal communication skills that needs to be practiced, what are the responsibilities and function of the provider when it comes to doing that. And then the framework for doing this counseling generally follows the balanced counseling strategy, wherein we want to focus on what the client actually needs. And then as they go through the process of identifying what matches your need and what methods are going to meet those needs, they have those discussions in terms of what's the effectiveness of this particular method, what's the advantages, how do you use it, what are its limitations, side effects, and one of the great thing about the balanced counseling strategy plus is the fact that there are cue cards that the provider could actually use both as a job aid and as a visual job aid for the client. And then there is another component to the balanced counseling strategy material, which is the client material or brochure, which could be given to the client to take a look at and read additional material. When it comes to rumors and myths, those are discussed also with the providers during training to make sure that they are able to correct or respond to those questions. Emma, do you have anything to add?
Emma, you're on mute if you're trying to add.
I'm saying Ricky has captured it well, and talking about the myths and misconceptions, and also the how to use the algorithm in the narrative has come out well in the checklist, and also in the content of the
Great,
BCS
thank you for
campus.
that, Emma. Good. So there are a few more questions. I have one from Bernabe Maranduque about asking if there's any news from WHO on the use of implants in the immediate postpartum period. I think on that one we can just say we have no news from WHO on that matter, but appreciate the question. There's another one here.
Yes.
Sure.
I think, Dr. Marinduque or Abe is a colleague from the Philippines who's also been the lead trainer as well as a resource for implants in the Philippines. On that question, I think we are expecting something to come out in the first quarter of next year, which is the updated version of the medical eligibility criteria. If for some who have not heard about a meeting that was called in March to review some of the changes needed in the current medical eligibility criteria, the group worked for about 3 days in Geneva. And one of the first output that came out was immediately to re-emphasize what evidence there is in terms of hormonal contraception and HIV, because of the great need to clarify those issues. The second part, we just had a discussion with a colleague from WHO. We've also learned that we've looked at additional evidences as well as having discussion of what's happening in the field. And I think we're going to be expecting updated versions of medical eligibility criteria in the coming months, hopefully before spring. Now we're keeping our fingers crossed that some of the changes will be positive when it comes to postpartum planning. But again, we don't have the definitive answer right now until it comes out.
Sure. And I do see we're running out of time here, or that we're past time. So I'm just going to take this one last question here about does the package take into account post-trainee follow-up? And for this, what I would do is just recommend that you take a look at the course notebook for trainers, which is one of the 3 books within the series. And in Appendix 2, there's something called Tips for Trainers. And it does discuss in here how you would conduct training, how you might follow up with those clinical providers that you've trained, and how to use any product. But of course, here we're talking about the contraceptive implants. I know
there's also a plan of discussion towards the end of the training, which is actually part of the training itself. That before we part ways, the trainer is going to work with providers in identifying who needs an immediate follow-up, who are the priority ones, and those who probably would start services, and then within a period of 1 to 3 months is to schedule what we call transfer of learning. This would be sort of like the bridge towards them doing things on their own. The transfer of learning opportunity within the first 1 to 3 months is to ensure that services actually started, that providers, if they're encountering issues, that they have a mentor or coach who's going to come out and work with them. And then as well as if there are any other issues outside of training, is that the system or the training program is able to address those before it's too late.
Great, thank you, Ricky. So I know there are a couple of questions. I can see people still typing, actually, but I think we're going to close out for today. Hopefully, we'll be able to answer some of your questions if you direct them to me via email. So I think if you've received the invitation, then you have my email address. I can also type it in the box here so that you can see it, and we can start to hand those off to whomever may be able to answer those. So thank you everyone for joining today. I wanted to give a special thank you to those technical partners who were involved with on the Implants Initiative and who are also carrying forward the mission of expanding access to LARC. Thank you to all the participants from near and far. I know it could have been a difficult time of day. Maybe it's early, maybe it's late, but we really appreciate you joining and the active participation. This chat window has been going nonstop since we started, so thank you for that. And we hope to hear from you soon. Thanks a lot, everyone.